The weekend had finally arrived, and with it, the one thing the protagonist dreaded most, spending it alone with her stepdad. Her mother had left for a few days to visit family, leaving her to endure the chaotic presence of a drunken, self-appointed life coach. By noon, the stepdad had already gone through half a bottle of whiskey, and his confidence was soaring. He lounged on the couch, his unshaven face grinning wide as he stared at the protagonist, who was trying to find a way to escape the looming disaster. She had plans to relax, maybe catch up on some work, but those dreams were shattered as soon as he slurred out a sentence. "You know, kid, I've been thinking," he began, wobbling slightly in his seat. "You need to start taking life more seriously. You need confidence, real confidence." The protagonist raised an eyebrow. "Confidence? From you?" He gave a slow nod, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Yeah. I mean, look at me. I'm living proof that confidence can get you anywhere." "Oh, really?" she said sarcastically. "Is that why you got fired from your last 3 jobs?" He waved her off. "Hey, that's all part of the learning process. You think they didn't learn anything from me? Of course they did. But enough about them, let's focus on you. You're like, how do I say this? A diamond in the rough, and I'm gonna polish you up." "Uh-huh," the protagonist muttered, half expecting the conversation to end with him passing out on the couch. But no, he was far from done. "First things first," he said, sitting up straighter. "Your love life." The protagonist's stomach churned. "What about it? You've been way too passive about it. You need to take charge. Show them who's boss." She raised her hands in protest. "What are you talking about? I'm not even dating anyone." He squinted at her. "Doesn't matter. That's the perfect time to get started. Start texting your crush, you know? Be bold. Like really bold." "I don't even have a crush," she said, hoping that would shut him down, but he wasn't deterred. "Liar," he said, wagging his finger. "Everybody's got someone in mind. You just gotta put yourself out there. You can't be shy about it. You gotta make the first move." He started rifling through her phone on the table, picking it up like it was a treasure map. "I'll do it for you, all right? Just watch me." She snatched the phone from his hands. "No way. I don't need you to text anyone for me." "Fine, fine," he said, leaning back. "But mark my words, the best way to get a guy's attention is to make him wonder what he's missing." "What does that even mean?" she asked, shaking her head in disbelief. He shot her a sly grin. "What it means is, you need to leave a little mystery. Don't tell him everything. Send a few cryptic texts. Like I'm thinking about you." "Are you serious?" she asked, horrified. "I'm not texting my crush that." "Listen," he said, looking dead in the eyes. "I'm telling you this as a seasoned pro. No one will ever know how to treat you if you don't make them curious. And trust me, I know exactly what I'm talking about." She sighed deeply, her mind racing to find an escape from the conversation. But it wasn't over. No, the stepdad was just getting started. All right, he said, nodding sagely. "We need to talk about your job. Now you're not gonna get far just sitting there being all polite and quiet. You need to assert yourself. Step up to the plate. Be aggressive." She didn't know what she had done to deserve this. "Aggressive? What are you talking about?" "You need to show them who's boss," he exclaimed, spilling his drink slightly as he gestured broadly. "Tell them, I'm here to make an impact, and you'll get that promotion in no time. Trust me. I've done it before. Hell, I'm practically a motivational speaker." She stared at him, dumbfounded. "You've never had a job longer than 6 months, and now you're a motivational speaker?" He waved a hand dismissively. "That's just the system holding me back. But you've got potential. I see it. You just need the right mindset." Her phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the momentary silence. She glanced at it, relieved to see a message from a friend. Before she could respond, her stepdad leaned in, looking over her shoulder. "What's that?" "Oh, I know that person. They're perfect for you, he said with a drunken smile. Send them a message, tell them you're thinking about them. Don't be shy. She groaned inwardly. I'm not sending anyone a message. You're completely out of your mind. But the stepdad didn't care. He was already thinking of the next piece of valuable advice to offer. You want a promotion, right? He asked, leaning forward with wide eyes. Well, I'm gonna teach you the secret. It's called fake it till you make it. You don't have to know what you're doing. Just act like you do. She stared at him, her mouth agati. That's literally the worst advice I've ever heard. Ship, he said, wagging a finger. You'll thank me later. I promise. There was no escape. The next few hours were a blur of nonsense and absurd tips, each one more ludicrous than the last. The stepdad's drunken ramblings spiraled into even stranger territory, from career advice to how to get ahead in a relationship to how she should treat herself like a queen. I mean, you gotta show them who's in charge, he said, eyes half closed, a bit of drool hanging from the corner of his mouth. You can't just be the nice girl, you know? You've got to be the girl who walks in and commands attention. She couldn't help but laugh at the sheer absurdity of it all. And that's how you got Mum to marry you? He paused, giving her a sly wink. Exactly. The night carried on, the stepdad's advice growing even more outlandish. But one thing was clear, he truly believed in the absurd wisdom he was doling out. And while the protagonist couldn't escape the surreal comedy of the situation, she found herself laughing more than she expected. But somewhere deep down, she knew she'd never follow a single piece of advice he gave. It was, after all, coming from the same guy who couldn't remember how to make toast without burning it. The next morning came faster than the protagonist had hoped. Her head ached from the chaotic night of drunken life coaching, but there was no avoiding it. Her boss had scheduled a video call at 11 a.m., and she had to prepare. The stepdad, still riding high on his liquid courage from the night before, was perched on the couch, watching an infomercial about some self-help program. The protagonist took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself for another round of unwanted advice. As she set up for the video call, the stepdad approached, swaying slightly. All right, kid. It's time to take your career to the next level. She shot him a look. I don't need your life coaching today, okay? I just need to focus. Nonsense, he slurred, putting an arm around her shoulder. I've got the secret to success, and you're gonna use it. Trust me, I've been where you are, stuck in the mud. I got out of it, and you can too. She muttered, wishing she could just go back to bed. And what's your big secret this time? He grinned like a kid about to drop a bombshell. Confidence. That's all you need. The secret to success? Confidence. You gotta show them who's boss. She was already regretting the day. And how exactly do you propose I do that? He took a seat next to her, leaning in like he was about to reveal world-changing wisdom. First, forget being polite. You need to be bold. Assertive. When your boss sees how confident you are, they'll bend over backward to give you a raise or a promotion. Believe me, it works. I've done it. I know these things. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it. Her boss had just sent a quick text. Ready for the call? Okay, she said, forcing a smile. I'll just be a minute. The stepdad wasn't done yet. Hold on. Before you go, let me help. This is where you really need to make a statement. You've got to show him you mean business. She stared at him, confused. What do you mean? His eyes gleamed with drunken wisdom. You need a little, flair. Something to grab their attention. You don't just walk into a meeting, no. You make an entrance. Before she could protest, he grabbed his phone and opened the camera app. Here's the plan. When they pick up, you look them straight in the eye, right? And you say, I'm here to make an impact. They'll love that. Are you kidding me? She said, incredulous. Nope, he said, all seriousness. It's about confidence. Just say it like you mean it. And don't be shy. Don't just sit there looking all timid. I can't just walk in and say that, she replied, her heart sinking. I'll look like a joke. He shook his head, drunk but determined. No, you won't. You gotta believe in yourself, kid. If you can't fake it, you're screwed. No one's going to take you seriously if you act like you're just lucky to be there. You've got to own it. She opened the door to her room, preparing for the call. Fine, whatever. I'll do the impact thing. Good, he said, stumbling to his feet. But wait, one more thing. I've got another secret for you. She groaned inwardly but braced herself. What now? You've got to flirt, he said with a grin, as if he just discovered the key to the universe. You've got to make them feel special. Especially if it's a man you know? She stared at him, horrified. Flirt? With my boss? Why not? They like the attention. Trust me, it'll work wonders. She opened her mouth to protest, but before she could, the phone buzzed again. It was her boss, ready to begin the call. She picked up and immediately tried to look professional. The stepdad hovered behind her, watching eagerly. Good morning, she said as cheerfully as she could manage, trying to ignore her stepdad's gaze. I'm ready for our meeting. Her boss smiled back through the camera, but she could already tell he looked a little confused. Morning. You sound upbeat. I am, she said, trying to sound positive while mentally preparing for the impact moment. Her stepdad gave her a thumbs up from behind her, and she resisted the urge to roll her eyes. The conversation was awkward from the start. She followed her stepdad's advice and tried to sound confident, but it felt forced. The more she tried to own the conversation, the more she sounded like she was reading from a motivational speech script. So I've been thinking, she said, trying to take charge. I'm here to make an impact. You know, I've been reflecting on my goals and… Her boss cut her off, his eyebrows knitting in confusion. I'm glad to hear that, but what do you mean exactly by impact? Just a general term, she said quickly, realizing her stepdad's advice had made no sense at all. I mean, I'm eager to take on more responsibility. Be more assertive. Her boss nodded, though it seemed like he was more confused than impressed. Right, well, let's talk about that in more detail. I actually wanted to discuss your next project. The protagonist sighed inwardly, hoping she could salvage this. But the stepdad wasn't done. As she tried to steer the conversation back to work, he started talking under his breath, giving her further help that made everything worse. Tell him you're thinking about him. Send him a little text, he whispered. Do not say that, she hissed, giving him a sharp look. But it was too late. Her boss's expression changed slightly, like he just heard something odd, but he kept smiling politely. You all right there? Yeah, she said, laughing nervously. I'm great. Just, brainstorming some ideas. Her stepdad patted her on the back. Perfect, kid! Just keep showing them your confidence. You're gonna nail this. The call dragged on for another 20 minutes, each second more painful than the last. By the end, the protagonist had somehow managed to convince her boss that she was competent, even if she felt like she was drowning in self-doubt. As soon as the call ended, she slumped back in her chair. I think I might die of embarrassment. Her stepdad grinned like he just won a gold medal. See? Told you. It's all about confidence. She shot him a look. I'm never listening to you again. Oh, you'll thank me later, he said, offering a drunken wink. She buried her face in her hands, wondering how she'd ever recover from this disaster. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of awkward interactions. The protagonist sat in her room, trying to regain some sense of normalcy after the disastrous video call. Her stepdad, on the other hand, had launched into yet another self-proclaimed motivational speech, now talking about how she should negotiate with her boss. You've got to take control of your career. He slurred from the kitchen, clearly still riding high from his earlier whiskey binge. You don't just sit back and wait for opportunities to come to you. No, you have to demand them. She groaned in frustration, her head pounding. Stepdad, I've told you 100 times, I don't need your advice. He staggered into her room, grinning like a man with all the answers to life's problems. Nah, kid. This is the thing. You don't ask for things politely. You demand them. You think you'll get a raise by sitting there being nice? No, you've got to show 'em that you're the only person they need. She stared at him, deadpan. Right. So I should just march into my boss's office and demand a raise? While I'm at it, I'll ask for a company car and a vacation home. He nodded vigorously, clearly oblivious to how ridiculous his advice sounded. Exactly. Show 'em you're not afraid to take what you deserve. Make 'em feel like they'll lose out if they don't promote you. This was going downhill fast. I can't just walk in and act like I own the place. That's not how it works. You gotta fake it till you make it, he said sagely, taking another swig from his bottle. Trust me, kid, I've been there. I've done it all. You don't know how many times I've walked into an interview, totally unqualified, and walked out with the job. You've got the power, you just don't know it. The protagonist stared at him, wondering how this man could be so confident in his bizarre and completely ineffective approach to life. I can't believe I'm hearing this, she muttered, rubbing her temples. He patted her on the back in that overly familiar, drunken way. Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Confidence is the key. Everything else falls into place once you believe you deserve it. The protagonist didn't know how much more of this she could take. He was completely convinced that he was some kind of motivational genius, but it was all nonsense. It was hard to imagine someone taking him seriously, and yet there he was, offering advice like he was a guru. She forced herself to smile politely, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally get the hint that she wasn't interested in his life lessons. I'm going to take a nap, she said, standing up and walking toward the door. I need some time to think. But of course, he wasn't going to let it go. That's the other thing. You've got to take control of your mind. Get rid of all that negative self-talk. The only thing standing in the way of your success is you. She stopped in her tracks, turning to face him. You're saying that I'm the one stopping myself from getting ahead? He nodded enthusiastically, his voice becoming more animated as he rambled. Exactly. The only thing holding you back is your own doubt. You've got to push that stuff aside. You've got to tell yourself, I deserve this. She gave him a look of disbelief. Stepdad, you just spent 2 hours telling me how to flirt with my boss, and now you're telling me to tell myself I deserve this? Which one is it? He blinked, clearly processing her words a little too slowly. Hey, you need both, all right? Confidence and flirting. They go hand in hand. Trust me, the world's your oyster when you combine the two. She let out a long sigh, rubbing her temples again. This conversation was going absolutely nowhere. Look, I've heard enough for one day. I don't need advice on how to flirt or demand things. I just want to relax. He seemed to take that as a personal challenge. Fine, relax all you want. But don't come crying to me when you're stuck in the same job for the next 10 years, still waiting for someone to notice you. That did it. I'm not waiting for anyone to notice me, she snapped. I've worked hard to get where I am, and I don't need you telling me that I haven't earned anything. The stepdad seemed to deflate a little at her words, his grin fading. Well, I'm just trying to help. You'll thank me one day. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting out a breath. It was no use trying to explain. He was too far gone in his delusional self-help world to understand. You know what? Maybe I will. Maybe one day, I'll look back on today and think, wow, my stepdad was right. He grinned, clearly pleased with her concession. That's the spirit. I knew you had it in you. She shook her head, finally leaving the room. It wasn't worth the energy. As much as she hated to admit it, there was something oddly charming about his misguided confidence. But there was also something incredibly frustrating about the way he kept pushing his absurd advice on her. The rest of the day went by without incident. She spent some time trying to catch up on work, her stepdad periodically chiming in with unsolicited tips on everything from how to organize her desk to how to be more mysterious in her personal life. His suggestions were completely random, but somehow, in his drunken state, they always came with a sense of certainty that almost made them sound plausible. By the time evening rolled around, the protagonist had almost forgotten about the ridiculous motivational speeches. Almost. But then, just as she was about to relax, her stepdad entered the room again, this time carrying a bottle of tequila. "All right," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "You've got to unwind. Relax. This is your time to let go and enjoy life. Let's have a drink together, and I'll teach you how to really live." She glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. "You want me to drink with you?" "Exactly," he said, pouring 2 glasses. "It'll help you loosen up. You know, get rid of all that stress. You need to stop being so uptight. Life's too short." She stared at the glass, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Maybe one day, she'd look back on this and see it for what it was, a bizarre, drunken series of misadventures with her delusional stepdad. But for now, she had no idea what to do with any of it. Maybe she'd just pour herself a glass and pretend she could follow one of his absurd life lessons, without completely losing her mind. "Well," she said, lifting the glass, "to life lessons, I guess." He clinked his glass against hers, a drunken smile on his face. "To living life to the fullest." The night dragged on with little change. As the tequila settled in and the last few drops were poured into their glasses, the protagonist began to feel the effects. Her stepdad had settled into an intense discussion about reaching your potential, convinced that alcohol was the key to unlocking her inner greatness. She tried to zone out, but the relentless positivity of his ramblings made it almost impossible. "You know, kid," he slurred, leaning in with a big grin, "you've got to embrace failure. Don't be afraid of it. Failure's like a stepping stone to greatness. You trip, you fall, but you get back up, stronger than before." She sighed, wishing she could just escape into her own thoughts for a moment. So, what's next? You want me to fail on purpose?" He laughed, completely missing the sarcasm. "Exactly. You get it. You gotta fail on purpose sometimes. That's how you learn. Like, I didn't get where I am by succeeding all the time. I learned by screwing up. I learned by not caring about what other people thought." She couldn't help but laugh, though the humor was tinged with disbelief. "So you're saying you succeeded because you didn't care about the consequences of your actions?" "Exactly," he said, as if he'd just cracked some ancient code. "That's the key, kid. Don't overthink it. Life's all about taking risks and not worrying about the outcome." She raised an eyebrow. "So what, I should just go into work tomorrow and act like I don't care if I get fired?" "Ding, ding, ding! You're catching on," he said, laughing loudly at his own brilliance. "You don't care about anything. You've got to have that attitude. That's how you get ahead." "Right," she said, clearly sarcastic. "I'm sure my boss will love that attitude. Maybe I'll walk in wearing a clown suit, just to really drive the point home." His face lit up. "That's the spirit. Why not? Just make them remember you. Who cares if it's a bit out there? People like when you're bold. And if they don't, who cares? Screw 'em." She shook her head, almost in disbelief. "I think I've had enough advice for one night." But of course, he wasn't done yet. "Hold on, one last thing. You've got to visualize success, kid. You've got to picture it. Every day, you close your eyes, and you see yourself winning. You see yourself getting that promotion. You see yourself out there making bank." She stared at him, wondering how this man was so convinced of his own genius. "You really think this works?" "Hell yeah, I do," he said, leaning in as if revealing the greatest secret of the universe. "I do it all the time. I picture myself being a millionaire. And you know what? It works. I'm not there yet, but I will be." Her face twitched. "You mean to tell me, you just sit around, imagining yourself with piles of money, and that's supposed to make it happen? You'd be amazed at how far visualization can take you," he said, his tone serious now. "You've got to manifest your future, kid. You've got to feel it in your bones." She stared at him, speechless for a moment. "Well, if that's the case, I'm gonna manifest myself a vacation to the Bahamas. Maybe I can visualize myself not having to listen to any more of your life coaching." He laughed loudly, completely missing the sarcasm. "That's the attitude. See, you're learning? Just keep thinking big. Visualize the life you want, and it'll come. Trust me." She put her head in her hands, trying to figure out where things had gone so wrong. "I don't know whether I should be annoyed or impressed. You've somehow managed to make all of this sound plausible, even though it's complete nonsense." He grinned like he had won a victory. "See? You're finally getting it. It's all about believing in yourself. If you don't, who will?" The more he spoke, the more exhausted she felt. She couldn't tell if she was learning anything valuable, or if she was just losing her mind. Either way, it didn't feel like the advice she needed. She had her own sense of direction, her own goals, but hearing this nonsense made her question everything. "Okay, stepdad," she said, rubbing her temples. "I'm gonna give your advice a try. I'll go in tomorrow and just not care. I'll visualize myself getting promoted. I'll act like I own the place. Is that what you want to hear?" He clapped his hands together, thrilled that she was finally on board. "That's the spirit. You've got this. Just remember, it's all about confidence. You can't be afraid to look a little ridiculous. That's what gets people's attention." She forced a smile, nodding along. "Yeah, I'm sure the world will be so impressed by my boldness." He stood up, clearly satisfied with the conversation. "You'll thank me one day. I promise." The protagonist didn't even know how to respond anymore. It felt like she had been living in a bizarre alternate universe where nothing made sense, but her stepdad's drunken enthusiasm somehow made everything seem like the next big thing. The whole situation was ridiculous, but somehow she found herself buying into it, if only to get him to stop talking. As the night wound down, she stood up, ready to retreat to her room. "All right, I'm off to bed. I need some peace and quiet." He gave her a big, exaggerated thumbs up. "Good call. Rest up. You've got big things ahead. You'll see. When you're at the top, you'll look back and thank me." She nodded absently, already retreating to her room, thankful for the quiet. Maybe, just maybe, this whole thing had been more about him than her. Maybe he needed to believe that his drunken ramblings could actually change someone's life. She didn't know, and she wasn't sure if she cared. All she knew was that she needed to get some sleep and figure out how to handle another day of ridiculous life lessons. The next morning came far too quickly. She awoke with a pounding headache, a feeling of dread hanging in the air. She hadn't taken her stepdad's advice seriously, of course. She had no intention of waltzing into work and acting like a ridiculous caricature of self-confidence. But as the day went on, a tiny, nagging thought stuck with her. What if he was right? What if she was the one holding herself back? It was a dangerous thought, one she wasn't sure she wanted to entertain. But deep down, she couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was some truth to his outlandish theories. And so, the cycle of doubt and self-reflection began again, her stepdad's drunken words echoing in her mind, refusing to be ignored.